You're now listening to the Boys in the Booth podcast with your hosts, Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams. New episodes every Monday on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Hello and welcome to episode 112 of the Boys in the Booth podcast. This time we've got a special guest on. You've probably already seen in the title. His name is Remy Monaco. He's a buddy of mine. But before we do introductions, you're probably wondering, who's this talking to me and who is hosting right now? You know, it's not Harper Cody. So we're going to do things a little bit differently here. And I will be asking the guys how they're doing. So Casey, why don't you go first? How you doing, man?
Doing pretty well, other than the fact that I lost 7 toes on Saturday skiing all day. So that was unfortunate. Pretty freaking cold out here in Collingwood after getting just blasted with snow. Now we're just getting hit by a whiteout and some freezage. I know you guys are all getting the same because I've seen on every single Brockville Citizens Facebook, Instagram, social, LinkedIn, every single social media platform they have, they're posting a video of how much snow they're getting. It's like, I don't care. But anyways, back to positive notes, doing well. How's Harp doing?
I'm doing good. It's Martin Luther King Day as we're recording, and I did not know that when I was at work this morning in the studio because I'm looking at tsn.ca and seeing the schedule of all the afternoon hockey games that are on, and I'm like, what the heck? And so I literally had to Google, is today a U.S. holiday? And it makes sense that today is MLK Day, so was able to come home, do a bit of shoveling, of course, and then watch the Sabres against Detroit. And I wish I could come on and be in a good mood and talk about an overtime victory for the Sabres, but they blew a third period lead and lost. So, no, ton of games on today, and it was really nice to watch some this afternoon. So all in all, I'm doing pretty good.
Why is it that you radio guys know that it's National Cinnamon Bun Day, but you don't know that it's Martin Luther King Day? That's a good point, actually.
I was thinking the same thing. Like, if a radio guy is going to know something about something, it's going to be a holiday about whatever the fuck. And I can't believe he didn't know about that. And also, too, in our fantasy group chat, Alan at Mansky last night was talking about it. He was like, look out for the afternoon games, set your lineups, like whatever. So, got to pay more attention. But anyways, guys, I'm great as well. You might notice I've got a Kachina, Arizona jersey behind me here. And that's because I wasn't sure who to pick, but I got the Kachina jersey up. Casey and I were involved in a small little parlay the other night, and it was like a slam dunk, absolute slam dunk, and we were given the odds by our buddy here, Remy. We're going to talk a lot about betting, and we're going to introduce him soon, but I've got the Kachina jersey up because they beat the Maple Leafs, and that was the only team that we needed to hit. Toronto was like 75 to 25 odds to hit, and we lost. What a joke it was. Karl Vamelka, whatever his name is the second coming of Patrick Waugh, and what a night. So that's why I've got that jersey up.
I took 2 parlays on that day, and I went 7 for 9 on them, and the 2 that I missed on was Arizona beating Toronto. And that just blew my mind. But at the same time, I'm not surprised, because if it's one team that's going to screw me, it's going to be the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's like, I've now take a vow to never bet on a Toronto game ever again, either for or against them, because if I vote against or bet against them, they're going to win. It's like, it's inevitable. So I'm just never going to do that again.
I have to jump in here with the Coyotes. So another friend of ours, Calvin, Chad, he was doing some early season NHL betting, and he had a parlay where he hit the first 2 games bang on. And then at the time, he bet against Arizona, obviously, because they were like 0-11-1 out of the gate or something. And then they beat Seattle for their first win of the season, and that just completely washed everything out for him. So
thank you, Scott Wedgwood.
Yeah, true. Exactly. That's right. Okay. Yeah. Without further ado now, we'll introduce our guest who's been waiting there patiently. Our guest, his name is Remy Monaco. He's a friend of mine from our days back at UofT. Multiple, undergraduate hockey championships under our belt between the two of us, a bunch. He was my captain for a little bit, and then I carried the torch after he graduated. He is also, and I'm not making this up, a 2017 world champion with Team Hong Kong for ball hockey. This is true, and we have the picture in the for the episode notes and on the page, so you can check it out. There's a picture of him with the trophy, world champion. Wow. But the reason we're bringing him on today is because recently there's been a lot of talk on our page about sort of getting into hockey betting and trying to win the listeners some money, right? So we brought on Remy because he's a smart guy, he's a talented guy, analytical by nature. He's currently doing his MBA at UofT, and he built this model using expected goals and goals saved above expected. And his model is predicting outcomes for NHL games. And so without further ado, let me introduce to the Boys in the Booth podcast, my friend Remy Monaco. How you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for the intro. It's always kind of funny to hear the world champion title thrown around, but it's just one more trophy, I guess, that not a lot of people say they can have or can say they have. Happy to be here.
This is my burning question. Was the World Championship trophy with Hong Kong more important to you than the multiple Woodsworth Intramural Championship D2 trophies?
I think my time at UofT before you came, we didn't really have a goalie, so the t-shirts are very elusive. So I think it was much sweeter to win the t-shirt after my early undergrad days.
Okay, and so I want to hop right in. And for the listeners here, Remy is also in our fantasy league. And so my first question, actually, that I had written down here: if you're so good at betting, why am I pumping you in fantasy? And I'm sure we're going to talk a bit about that. But let's do Fantasy Corner, and then we'll get into the questions for Remy. So, Case, why don't we start with you with Fantasy Corner and what's going on for fantasy for you?
I just got absolutely pumped by PPD again last week. I know everyone can say that, but I feel like I had a lot. Like the first night, I had 8 guys with PPD beside their name. And Luke and I got into a little bit of a blood feud for a while there during last week, but he came out on top. And you know what, that's fine because I know that at the end of the day in playoffs, I've got a better roster than that guy. So as long as I make playoffs, I'm going to beat him anyways.
I hope Luke's listening to this. Harp, how was your fantasy last week and this week?
It was good. Got a win, so the record gets a little bit better. It's still bad, but we're up to 4-9 now, and beat Taylor Prosser, Backastore Bandits, 133-109. So it was relatively close, and just was able to pick up a few guys in free agency to get those games played up. Obviously, it's tough right now with so many guys out with COVID and games being postponed, like what Case said. But I was able to pick up guys like Lawson Krause and Michael Bunting and even Carter Verhaeghe, which just really surprised me. And the Florida Panthers have scored 16 goals in 2 games. So he was able to get in on the goal scoring the last couple of games, which was really nice. So got the win last week, which was good. And then this week up against the Danbury Trashers, Dylan Finley. So up on him to start. Projected to lose, so we'll have to see how it goes. Sorry, Case, go ahead.
That's the second most in NHL history in a 2-day span by the Florida Panthers.
The second most goals total? Is that that's what you're saying? Wow.
Yeah.
That's
even in the 80s?
Yeah, it was like the team ahead of them, I think, was like 89, and then it was like Washington 2003, and then a bunch of 80s teams below them. Christ. Which is pretty crazy to think about considering how many goals they were scoring back then.
Yeah.
I saw this thing where it's Florida in their last 50 games has nearly as many goals as Montreal in their last 82, which is that's tough. That's almost doubling Montreal. So, I mean, not to beat up on the Habs, who are officially in dead last right now, even behind Arizona. But the price is right for Shane Wright this year. So I guess we'll see if that continues. But fantasy for me last week, guys, another one in the W column for me. I'm still chasing the meatheads in first place, though. Like Luke Sheridan, and I know he's listening. Like the second I release this, he's always the first listener. And I think he listens on double speed too, so that he can text me like as soon as, and see if I chirped him. But the chirping's going to continue because I don't like his squad at all. Like when I look at it on paper, but he keeps edging out victories, and it looks like this week he's projected to win again against the Hornytown only fans, who hasn't even been playing the last few weeks because allegedly he got locked out of his account. So here's another dub for the meatheads, most likely. And I am playing this week Remy, actually, which I wanted to bring up. And the projections are just gross for that. So Remy, before I also talk to you about that, I do want to mention as well that a bit of a blunder last week for me, even though I got the win, was picking up Evander Kane. And anyone in our league listening is going to know like right away that I've tried to trade Evander Kane a million times already, because I picked him up on the day where in the news it was reported that he was expected to sign within 3 hours. So I picked him up, and I thought I was the fastest guy to do it, and I was pumped. But now, because there's this thing going on where he traveled to Vancouver when he had COVID, the league is looking into it, and so I don't know what's happening there. He was dropped in my other league, so I don't know if he's even valuable to have now. When he does come back, I know he will be, especially if he plays on Edmonton. But anyway, Remy, I'll pass it on to you. Talk about some fantasy, or maybe Case, if you can chime in, whatever. Up to you guys.
I just think Chad's probably the biggest snake oil salesman in the league right now. Every time you get a request, 5 hours later, the guy's just been dropped. So if Chad's trying to trade him, he's selling real low.
Yeah.
Yeah, not a great week. Yeah. Not a great week for me. I made some blunders too. My pride and joy Elvis in net for the Blue Jackets got a shutout, but I forgot to start him. And even today, I have Reimer. He's back off the IR, and the afternoon games, they got me too. So been a rough couple weeks for now Will Nye the science guy, but I think I'll bounce back. I had to take a spot when Rask was recovering. He didn't get the IR spot, so I was just eating up a roster spot there, and I'm still going with 3D. I'm going all offense. So I think once my guys regress to the mean, I'll have a good team. If I can squeak in the playoffs, I'll look like maybe the 2010 Kings, just plowing through everyone.
Love it.
There you go.
Love it. My defense have sort of been all offense lately. I've got Roman Josi, who is my vote for the Norris Trophy this year personally, and Mackenzie Weegar, who is suddenly the GOAT on the back end. He's got so many points for Florida in these last 2 games and these last 2 weeks. I've been absolutely loving him, and he was on that list of most underrated players as voted by the fans. So definitely check that out on the Instagram. I was kind of blown away by some of the people on both sides of that list, and then the fact that Jack Campbell was on both lists. It always makes me laugh when you get a guy who is seen as underrated and overrated.
You know what that is? It's people voting who are just like, I don't know. Like, what is he? Is he overrated, underrated? It's just like, he's such a polarizing player. It just freezes people. And like, personally, I don't know which side I would put him on either. So kind of makes sense. But speaking of fantasy, last thing I want to mention before we get into questions here for Remy is that Timo Meier currently in this afternoon game has 5 goals. 24.75 points right now in fantasy for 1 game, Timo Meier. And now last week or a couple weeks ago, remember I was saying, and I want this to be, on the record, Timo Meier is a dark horse for a good amount of heart votes. And so he's really making his case here for another fantastic game on his already fantastic season. So I just want to put that out there, that we are right about some things, and Timo Meier is tearing it up.
I must not have been on that episode. I don't remember that.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. You guys ready to get into some questions about Remy here?
Let's do it.
Okay, first one, Remy, we're going to start off easy. This is as much for me and the guys as it is for the listeners at home as well. I just want you to kind of go through and explain some relatively common betting terminology that people may or may not know. We'll start easy and maybe get into some more complex ones. So a few that just off the top of my head, like explain what the odds mean, plus and minus, to a dummy. Explain things like money line versus puck line, what a parlay is. I mean, we know what that is. We've been using those, but again, for people at home, what a point spread is, what it means to fade, what a pick'em is in terms of the odds, who a bookie is and what they do, etc. So if you could just kind of go through some of those and rhyme it off again for us here on the pod and for those listening at home.
Hope you're writing that down.
For sure. I mean, we can start very easy. Obviously, in any game, you got two teams. You have a favorite and an underdog. So the odds, there's different types of odds. I think you mentioned minus, which is like American odds. So there's American odds, which is like the plus 110, minus 130. Decimal odds, which kind of show you your direct return. So if you bet $100, you get 1.9 return. Or percentage odds, which is like implied win percentage, or basically how often that team needs to win to be profitable. So if you look at a game tonight, we have I think the late game between Pittsburgh and Vegas. That's called a pick'em, and a pick'em is like theoretically a 50-50. So those odds would be set at about 50-50, and there that means you just get exactly your return back. So you put $100 down and you win $100. So that would be like $200 because of the original bet of 100. Moving forward, money line, puck line. So money line is like how the standings are tracked, win and loss. If the team wins, the money line pays out. If the team loses, your money line bet is a loss. Puck line is the spread. In hockey, you don't see it too often. It's usually just a 1.5 spread. Sometimes 2.5 in like last week when Colorado played Arizona, when it's a really big change. But in hockey, the spread is usually 1.5 goals, as opposed to a sport like football or basketball where it can be 3.5, 4.5, anything where that's what the bookie or the house or Vegas, however you want to call it, sees the game at. So moving to bookie, I mean, that's just like who you place your bet with. If you have a buddy, like I come on the podcast and I say, hey Chad, like let's make a bet. We could bet each other. That's kind of a direct exchange. A bookie would be like, I have a guy, so I call my bookie and he'll take the bet. He'll lay me those odds, which just means you're backing the event to not happen, if that makes sense. So going back to that Pittsburgh Vegas game, if I laid you Vegas to win, you would be taking Vegas to win, in this case on the money line, and I would be laying that. So I would be backing Vegas to not win or Pittsburgh to win. I think you also mentioned fade. Fade is kind of like laying. It's like the opposite. So, I think we're going to get into my picks for tonight. And if you don't like them, you disagree, you can fade me. And that just means, this guy's kind of full of BS and I'm going to go the other way. So I think we all have that one guy who claims he has the magic, or he knows he has this new thing, right? Maybe in this case, it's me. But if you want to fade someone, you're just saying they don't know what they're talking about. I think that's everything. I think, and parlay. Parlay is just, you're like multiplying. So rather than saying the Penguins are going to win or the Vegas is going to win, you're going to say the Penguins are going to win, and I think Arizona is going to beat Montreal. And because you need both of those outcomes, both of those events to occur, you're multiplying the odds against each other. So if both of them have a 50% chance of occurring, you now have a 25% chance of your bet paying out, and you're trying to get more favorable odds using that. One more thing I don't think we mentioned, but I'd like to touch on, is an exchange. So how odds work are, you see the pick'em. Usually, theoretically, the odds should be 50-50, like I mentioned. But if you go on Bet365 right now, they'll probably say minus 110, minus 110, or in the decimal odds, it'll be like 1.91. The conversion for that is just math, and you can do a quick Google to do that conversion, but it's really just preference and how you kind of interpret that information. Going back to the bookie and Bet365, this is going to be a lot of math for a podcast, so I apologize. But
that's why you're here, man.
You when you bet against Bet365, their business model is really centered on you losing, because if you keep winning, right, they're just giving you money, and that's not going to work. So what they have to do is build in what's called juice or VIG, and that's to ensure that they have a bit of a spread to protect against, continuously losing money. So if you take it this way, if you put $110 on Vegas, right, and they win, you only get $100, which means in the long term, Vegas and Pittsburgh, if they win 50% of the time, you're only getting 1.9% of your money, 1.9 times your money back, which means long term, Bet365 is going to make money and you're going to lose money. That's what makes betting against the house extremely difficult, because you're already fighting an uphill battle. So I like to do a lot of my betting on this sport exchange called the SportX. And what that does is it lets users bet against one another. So if I like the Pens and you like the Knights, we can actually go directly against each other, and we remove that juice. So rather than betting minus 110 on both sides, we can meet in the middle at exactly 100, which means we're going to get the correct payouts given the implied probability of the game. Does that make sense, or is that a little too much?
No,
it made sense to me.
I like that. Yeah, no, that's good. And the site that you're talking about, is that the site that you were telling me that you've been using a ton and you recommend that I get it, the one where you're playing with Ethereum?
Yes, so you can bet using Ethereum. You can also bet in, it's a crypto, so you can bet in stable coins, which are just, you can think of them as like traditional US dollars, and they're just in the crypto space to make, transfers a little smoother. I've been betting there for about 2 years now, and it definitely, betting is all about math. And when you remove that juice and you get that little edge back, that really adds to your profitability. So I really like using that exchange.
Okay. For people, listening right now, as like I'm talking about when we started talking about, explaining what things are, and people are listening to that probably going, piss off, I'm an experienced bettor, give me the details. So, and I'm thinking of like specifically guys at home that I know of who bet all the time, who are just like boring when they're listening to this right now. So let's get into your model. And I want you to talk about your model, how you came up with it, why you think it's a good model, and how it compares to some of the bigger ones out there.
For sure. I think I only built the model a couple months ago. I was inspired by my statistics class. The final project was to predict something. We had a range of topics. I didn't actually pick the sports topics because I didn't want to show my hand and tell my prof I was a complete degenerate. But when I got COVID, I was just bound to my room, and I figured, what else could I do? I could play around in Excel and build the model. So I started just running some regressions and seeing what stats affected outcomes more than others. And I really built it to be simple, because you can add so many variables to determine what's going to happen. If I remember when Vegas came in to the league, the Vegas flu was going around, so their home record was really strong. The Leafs are always going to lose the first playoff game, like little things like that. It's really hard to price those into a model. So I felt like using expected goals was a good place to start. I think it's a true indicator of how the game's going, the flow, and being a little more analytic than this team's higher in the standings, it still gives you some room to be simple as well.
Okay, and I know that you use also expected goals against and for goalies, and
right.
Talk about like why you think that's an important stat and how you incorporate that.
I think for like you and I, we both played goalie. We know the goalie has a big job to play. Sometimes you can be on, like Vejmelka last week against the Buds, or I guess Ryan, or Quick today. He didn't want to show up, and he just let Timo have a field day. So I think the goalie plays a really big role, probably like the single most important role in the team. So I think if you can group the team as an offensive unit, the goalie is probably going to have the biggest difference on the defensive side of things. So I decided to include that. Again, I didn't want to get too intricate and include all the defensive stats, but I felt like the goalie had enough of a pull where it would affect the results.
Remy, you mentioned the inspiration behind, creating your model and in your statistics class and having to kind of, do it as an assignment, so to speak. And so, one of my questions was, do you ever look at some of the big players models out there, like a Jay Fresh on Twitter or Dom Lucian of The Athletic, who daily will come out with things like projected NHL standings and things like that? Do you look at those guys at all for any inspiration with your model?
I think I've definitely seen them kicking around, but I don't think, I'm just pretty busy right now. I don't have time to look into it all. I know everyone has their own thing, and I think especially for me, this is just something that worked and a little kind of project I wanted to get started on. I remember I did a little bit of testing with the money puck model in the 2020 playoffs. Yeah, the lockdown or the bubble year, and I don't even know, was that 2020?
Yeah, that was when Columbus beat Toronto in 2020.
Yeah, so that's why I just purged it from my memory. I didn't love, just using someone else's data. It could be more accurate. I know they have a lot of factors, and I love looking at the big wheel with all the Stanley Cup odds. But I wanted to really make something of my own and just do it my way.
So where do you get your data from then? How does that work?
Yeah, so I built it in Excel. And I built a couple of macros to automate things. So I have a automatic pull in from Natural Stat Trick for expected goals, both home and away, because I think that has a really big factor in the outcome of the game. And then I do weigh the goalie statistics from Money Puck. I think they are pretty accurate, and so far they've been good to me. To be completely honest, I don't want to calculate, expected goals. I don't think I can track every game and do all that. So I am at mercy of their accuracy. But in terms of those stats, I think that those guys know what they're doing, and then that's going to be good enough for me at this point.
And another question I had was, how has the accuracy been so far? I know, for me, it's been pretty good because you've been sending me the nightly odds, and I've been kind of relying on it, also informing myself with, The Athletic, because obviously we pay for it, so we might as well get the benefit of Dom Lucian. And I like Money Puck a lot too, so I feel like I've been doing pretty well using your model combined with those two. So just explain the accuracy and maybe if you've had to make tweaks along the way or what have you.
Yeah, so I actually only added the goalies and the goals saved above expected about three weeks ago, maybe a month ago. One thing I didn't touch on the general betting rules was unit size. So unit size would be what you put on every bet. You could be $10, $100, $1. It really doesn't matter, but it's a good way to standardize your bets, because if you're putting $1,000 on one game and $1 on the other, it doesn't really matter if one won and the other didn't, because you could be up $1 and down $1,000.
Right.
So in terms of units, before I added the goals saved above expected, I was up 12 units through I think 85 games. I was hitting at about 72%, which wasn't that impressive, because a lot of the times the favorite, which would be the minus odds in American, is the right outcome. It's really just finding the value and making sure that you're not overpaying for that favorite. Since the addition of the goals saved above the expected, the goalie stats, my hit rate's been up to about 80%. So it's an 8% increase, or an increase of 8%. And I'm up 9 units through, I don't have the number here. I wrote it down. I'm up 9 units in about 35 games. There was a push in there. just because of the way my site works. But 9-38 versus 12-85. So I am seeing an increase since the goal is saved above expected. And I do have a list of other factors that I think would benefit. It's kind of a rolling project just to see how things go. Yeah, I don't think you're ever going to be perfect, right? It's almost impossible.
Yeah.
But it's also fun just seeing how something you built is coming to life.
Okay, so what are some of the factors then that you think you could also include? Like, what are some advanced analytics that you think are important for predicting, like successful predicting?
Yeah, I wanted to investigate, all the fancy words, the Corsi, the PDO, see how those, affect things. I like expected goals as kind of an overarching stat. Some of the, like, I guess more traditional stats, the power play and the penalty kill. And then if you're facing a very penalized team, someone who gets a lot of penalties, is that power play for your opposition, or I guess your power play versus their penalty kill, is that going to come into play? Maybe like a good team factor, quote unquote good. I don't think when the Leafs play someone like the Sens, they show up in the same way they do when they're playing the Lightning. So some sort of way to categorize these teams and see how they show up when they're playing someone above them, someone below them, or just maybe in those different thirds of the standings. And then also like a recency factor. So, last 10 games, I think hockey is very streaky. We see players get hot and they can go off for a week or two. So I think that would be an interesting stat to have. Again, all of that, it can get so intricate, but right now I'm just kind of chipping away at these.
I've never been like much of a bettor at all, but I've definitely been asked a lot, who do I think is going to win? Because I just watch a lot of hockey, and kind of the go-to ones that I look at right away, because I'm not looking at advanced analytics while I'm, sitting around having a beer with the guys after they ask me. The first thing I think about is recency. Last time these two teams played, I think about power play and how many penalties the other team's taken. So you kind of knock them all off right there, like kind of the traditional, like easy things that I can think about. But when it comes to the model of myself, I'm a stats guy. I love stats. I've been getting into advanced analytics, but I'm also a hockey player, and like through and through hockey player, where I believe in voodoo and I believe in breaking your funk and change of scenery and all these like buzzwords around the hockey mentality of things that can happen that will have an outcome in a game, but it's not quantifiable at all. It's, I'm thinking about how the last time these two teams played, they lost. The one team lost 5-1 to the other team, and there was 3 fights at the end of the game. Well, I think that the other team that lost is gonna come out just flying when these teams play. I kind of think about the psychology of a hockey player when I'm thinking about betting, and I should really just stick to the stats.
Or like
I think it goes both ways. Sorry to cut you off, Chad, but
all good.
No, I think I look back to another dark memory just in the mind of a Leafs fan, but the David Ayres game, right? Like you told me the whatever backup E-bug is coming on and he's facing like the top snipers in the NHL. A million years I would never think that Carolina could hold down the fort, but somehow they did. I don't know if it's a Leafs curse, but some things you just can't really put into numbers. So I get what you mean. Like it's there's like the hockey aspect and the stats, and I find like you're often at odds. They're at odds with each other because you just don't know exactly what side you want to pick.
I'd like to pull the history of play in a playoff series. If a team wins by more than, let's say, 5 or 6 goals, I want to see the amount of times the team that lost wins the next game, because I am willing to put money on they win more often than not.
Oh yeah.
It seems like every time someone whops someone 7-1 in the first game of a playoff series, they lose 3-2 to them next game. It's constantly, I see it happening.
All right, next week we'll have those results. I'll run the numbers.
I was going to say that too, Case, because that's the first thing I think of. Like when a team gets absolutely shelled and it's like 6-1, 7-1, for a fact, I mean, if they're a good team, that they're coming back next game and they're going to do that to their next opponent, whether it's the same team or not. Like if it's Colorado getting like absolutely pumped by the Leafs, like that 7-3 game, I'd have to look, but they probably came out the next game and beat a team, 5-2 or something.
Yeah. I can't think of how many times someone's asked me like, oh, who's the Devils playing tonight? I would say, oh, they're playing Washington. And they go, how do you feel about that game? I'm like, well, Washington lost 4-0 last game, so I'm not feeling good at all. Like,
yeah.
It's just going to be a stomping of the Devils.
Yeah. Okay, Remy, I've got another one. If you guys are good, if I jump in here, just give me like your general betting strategies on a nightly basis. So a night like tonight, I mean, it's a bit weird because it's Martin Luther King Day, so there are a ton of afternoon games. But on a night like tonight, what resources other than your model, if you are using resources other than your model, are you using to inform yourself and make decisions on tonight's games?
I think it goes back to what we just discussed. You're going to have the stats, but then there's also little pieces of news. My model doesn't really take into account individual player absences, especially with COVID and the last minute changes in the lineups. That's going to have an effect, especially if it's a locker room guy, right? You don't want the mojo of the room thrown off. I feel like, from a statistics point of view, a lot of those factors kind of balance each other out over the long term. So I think if you do stick to something like the model, in the big picture, all those things will work themselves out, and really the statistics will prevail. If you want to jump into tonight's picks, we can see how I'm doing so far.
Sure.
Yeah. It was funny. I had the Sabres and Red Wings game up, and it was some of the worst hockey I've ever seen. I don't know. Were you watching her?
I was watching, yeah. Oh, yes.
It reminds me of Pee Wee practice when the last 5 minutes and the coach is like, everybody on, and nothing happens. The puck just goes around and round and nothing really gets done. I just thought it was atrocious. I didn't realize how bad it looked between those two teams, at least. But luckily, unfortunately for Harp, I did have the Red Wings, so the comeback was there. It was pretty bad though. I don't know. It just seemed like no one could get anything done. Well, let's see what else I got. I had the Avs, so Minnesota forced a shootout, which is pretty impressive. But I did have the Avs, and it was in the model 3-2. Now, one thing I find about the games is games can be, if they're high scoring, they're usually high scoring for both teams. If they open up, the style changes, and we really see we won't see. Sometimes you see the 6-0, but if it's back and forth, a 2-1 game could easily turn into a 5-4 game. So I think my model is really good at predicting, which team should score more, but it's not very good yet at predicting exactly how much they score, just because of the in-game dynamics. Right. I also had the Coyotes, so I think they're up
4-2.
Yeah, they're up 4-2. So that's looking good. I did have the Kings, so I will say Timo got me there.
Timo.
Well, also if Johnny Quick shows up too, I'm sure that's a different story.
Yeah, I'd love to see the expected goals in that game, because I have Quick at actually saving 0.7 goals a game above expected, 0.8 actually.
He's been good.
So his 9 saves in 15 shots is not good.
Oh, it's not what the model said. I will say that. So if we say Arizona won, that I guess that puts us at about just over a unit. So if you bet $1 on each game, like the special boys in the booth picks, you'd be up $1.
Nice.
So
all right.
It all adds up.
I think
the late slate. Oh, you're gonna. What was that?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think your model might have to work in what Jonathan Quick had for breakfast that morning. I don't know how you're gonna get a macro to pull that, but it's got to be something like that.
It definitely, I don't know, a couple McGriddles or something just really weighed down.
Love it.
But
yeah, Remy, don't worry about missing that one. The Pacific Division is the worst one in the NHL, as I'm sure you know, and so it's pretty up in the air when you're betting on games between two division rivals.
Yeah, and there's another factor, right? Rivalry. That I think those teams are going to show up harder. They know it's an important game in the standings. So again, just so many things to add. Looking forward to tonight. I guess this game's on. I think Chicago scored recently, but I have the Hawks beating the crackheads, as Chad likes to call them. Moving on, we have the Islanders, the Blues, and the Penguins. So there you have it. I think the biggest factor here is if Ville Husso starts versus UC Saros. Those are two really top goalies. So I think that's going to be a very tight game. Nashville seems to always find a way to come back. I know recently there's been a lot of games between these top teams like Nashville, Florida, Carolina, where they look like they're out of it and somehow they tie it up late in the third. And that's actually one of my favorite bets is the live bet, because hockey's a funny sport. You know, you're down by a goal. It seems like you're down and out, but then you can pull the goalie and you just get a free power play. So late in the game, if you get a live bet opportunity on a team that's you've been playing well, and I think this is where like the eye test comes in. You see a team, they look good, they're just not getting it done. Looking at like the Leafs or the Caps with Matthews or Ovi, those are guys who are like just know how to put the puck in the net. So if you can get those guys at a high return, I think there's some value there. And I've been doing a lot of the live bets where you get really crazy odds, and then if they tie it up, you can usually hedge out your bet, which in layman's terms just means like it's like a cash out. You bet against yourself, so no matter what happens, you're guaranteed to make a profit.
Right.
Sweet.
I know you love Saros. Do you happen to have right now like what his expected goals are in front of you, like for tonight's game? You're saying it's going to matter if he starts, but
yeah,
I know you've been trying to pry him off me in fantasy. That's why I bring it up. The biggest blunder of my draft was Grubauer. I thought Seattle, new team, they're going to come out hot, and I think I passed up on like Anderson. I passed up on a lot. I took Grubauer way too early, and I think that's been a crux. So yeah, I've been trying to do the snake oil sales to back at you with Saros. I can't say who I'm trying to pawn off because everyone in the league is going to know my secrets. But right now I have Saros at 0.48 goals saved above expected, which is pretty good. Yeah.
And on the year, I guess we can take a look at that too. He's saved about 15 goals this year. Compared to expected. So expected's 89 and he's only let in 74. Yeah. So definitely one of the bigger gaps there, which I think he's playing amazing. Like just came right in for Rene and they didn't really break a sweat. Nashville's always a team to be reckoned with. I do like the banner, what is it? The 2017 Western Conference regular season.
Yeah.
So forced to be reckoned with.
Nashville is a weird team. Like at the start of the season, I think we put them in 7th in that division, guys, when we were ranking them. And like maybe I think around 7th, and we were like, what is this team? But we've seen the resurgence of Matt Duchene, Philip Forsberg. Saros has been ridiculous all year. What's his name? Roman Josi is playing like a Norris Caliber defenseman again. So like this team is like, are they good? Are they going to make the playoffs? Like, I don't know.
I think for sure. And let's not forget Tanner Jeannot, who could very well be a Calder Trophy finalist. That's right. He does a little bit of everything. But you're right. Like I think all of us were very critical of Nashville. And again, like Remy, I can get why you like Saros so much. He's kind of the guy there. He was the one who was solely responsible, I think, in my opinion, for the big run that they went on last year. And so, going with him on a lot of nights to do well is not a bad bet for sure.
Also, I will say too, Remy, that at the start of the year, I was very high on Grubauer as well. I think I had him ranked in my, pre-fantasy draft projections, I think I had him ranked like in and around my 7th or 8th best goalie in the league because I expected Seattle to be a lot better than they are. Casey knows all about this one, and I'm sure when time comes around where we talk about, you know, our standings update and where we were wrong and where we were right, I'm going to hear about that Seattle prediction. But
I am going to clip so much from that Pacific Division rankings where you guys were just at me about putting Seattle dead last in that division. I just hated their odds.
But I will say this, hold on, Case, about Seattle is that they have had abysmal goaltending from both of their guys all year in terms of goals saved above expected. So if they had even average goaltending similar to the Penguins last year in the playoffs, they would have been way better off this season. But they haven't got it done. Grubauer,
last week,
what's his name?
I took that mentality of something's got to give, and I needed a last minute pickup for a game's played, and I grabbed Grubauer. So I got him in net. And I picked him up last week, and he got me minus 4.45 points. So just brutal.
Yeah.
Guys, anything else for Remy before we wrap up?
I don't think so. Just wanted to be the first to say thank you. Extremely informative, and this is all still so fresh, I think, for a lot of people. But for us, I have yet to kind of dive into the betting world myself. But just to hear the terminology, that was big, and the live betting as well, because we like to joke around and say, oh yeah, Harp's more of an eye test guy, and all of this. So. That is something that's definitely interesting too. But no, just very informative, and it's cool that we can have a guy on to talk about his model, and you see some of the other ones out there. So the fact that you have your own, you're tinkering with it all the time is really cool, Remy. So just thank you for being so informative and knowledgeable here on the podcast.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Go ahead,
Harp's
Kate.
model would be like, the player on Nashville, his dad played with the coach of Buffalo, so he's going to score this game and Nashville's going to win. Like some nonsense like that. Like, that GM was the assistant to the regional manager of the other team, so he's going to have his guys in shape for this game. It's just like a bunch of nonsense connections that he picks his teams based off or something like that.
Yeah. John Tavares's child just got enrolled in preschool, so he's riding a high right now, and that would be factored in. I think for Harp's model, too, there would be like a grit factor as well, and Tom Wilson would be at the top for grit, expected grit, and all of that. So
expected grit.
But anyways...
I would say if there is like any sport where like those storylines come to play, I feel like hockey always has those. Like I remember Joe Veleno in Detroit, he had to drive up from Grand Rapids with Stevie Y because like they were crossing the border and he couldn't get a COVID test in time. He had to do it a different way and couldn't fly with the team. I don't know what it was. And I think he got a goal that night. There's always these little stories where and I feel like it's always the Leafs coming into play too. Maybe I just watch them too much, but like, rookie's first game, he had 3 points against the Leafs. Like just putting money on that might be profitable.
Yeah, the first one that comes to mind for me, it's actually 2 stories, same guy. Brian Boyle called up. He was playing for Manchester, which is in the Northeast. Called up to play in LA. Got on the plane that afternoon, landed 30 minutes before the game, got in the game and scored his first NHL point. And then again, Brian Boyle has cancer, and then on Hockey Fights Cancer Night, he scores a hat trick. Not a guy known for scoring, but in both those circumstances, he came up big. So it's like, whose model ever predicted that?
Wasn't that Boyle's first game back too, after like having his cancer go into remission as well? Like, I don't know if that's if that was the case or not, but I'm thinking about it, and maybe.
I feel like that game he scored like the shootout winner or something.
Maybe,
yeah,
something like that.
I think you're confusing two things.
Could be.
In his first game back, he had a moment as well.
Yeah.
It's funny we're bringing all this up, like the connections and backstories and things like that. One future one to watch out for betting will be to see like what kind of bets are placed in a Vegas Buffalo game when Jack Eichel finally makes his return and faces the Sabres for the first time, because that'll all come into effect. His time there, the whole, like, just the anger, the frustration from the not being able to get the surgery he wanted. And so it's like, how many guys are going to bet that, oh, Vegas will win this one, 7-1. Eichel will have 5 points. Like, just
Jack Eichel to score minus 10,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the first thing I thought of, just sort of looking ahead to the near future a little bit. And that I agree. Like, it just, those little connections, those little backstories, they are factors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I should mention that put my money where my mouth was, and I went ahead and put a future on Ovechkin winning the MVP because I said he would, and the same as Washington winning the Cup because that was my bold prediction. So I put a future on that just to try to back myself on this, and Roman Josi winning the Norris as well.
Yeah. Good odds, too, on Washington, and they're a good team. If they make the playoffs, anything can happen. But before we wrap up, I wanted to say, too, like, speaking of hockey betting, like, I titled this episode, like, this model is going to make you rich, or, like, how to get rich on hockey betting. So I hope that we did provide some, benefit to the people listening, and I think Remy's model is a pretty good one to at least, have as a starting point. But I wanted to say, too, that hockey in general, I think, is the most, like, it's definitely the luckiest sport. And Remy, I was just, as sort of a final question, I was wondering if you could kind of weigh in on that. Like, compared to, say, a basketball, like, I feel like hockey, the underdog wins way more because so much of the game is just more determined by luck, as opposed to basketball, where you have the same 5 guys on the court for virtually the entire game who you kind of know exactly what they're going to do, right? So is that a fair assessment to say that?
I would say, since I've been tracking things, the favorite's been winning just about on par with expected. I think there's so many factors, and again, like, the way, like, going back to, like, our initial conversation on, like, bookies and stuff, the way, like, Vegas or the house wants to place their odds is what they think based on their model. They might favor someone as an underdog or a favorite, just because that's the way they're exposed, and they want to shift where the money's going. So it's really hard to say, but I do agree that it feels like hockey's really hard to predict. Every time you think you got not a sure thing, but a likely outcome, it seems to go the other way. And I don't know if that's because, everyone plays different ice time, and they have, I would say, less of a factor on the outcome than, like, another star in, like, basketball or baseball. But we can definitely set something up to start tracking that and regroup and see how it goes by the end of the year.
That'd be cool. All right, guys, if that's everything, I'll wrap up now. Any final questions?
Just thank you again for coming on, and just be prepared for me to bug you for your model every night.
Yeah, I think we're gonna set up the Patreon for the pick, so
love it.
You'll have the link. I don't know. No, thanks for having me, guys. It was a lot of fun. We should come back later in the year and see how the models evolved, and see if you guys have gotten into the degenerate lifestyle any deeper.
Too late on that part.
Yeah. Betting aside, too late on that part.
Yeah, betting aside.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Remy, for doing this, and thank you so much for the listeners for listening to episode 112 of the Boys in the Booth podcast. We'll talk to you next week. Cheers.
This has been another episode of Boys in the Booth with Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams. New episodes every Monday on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Connect with the Boys in the Booth on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Boys in the Booth. Visit boysinthebooth.com for show details, and don't forget, you can become a patron of the podcast for just $1 a month at www.patreon.com/boysinthebooth.